The intelligence agencies of the deep state, masquerading as intelligence agencies that serve the American people, have been out of control almost from the start. I mean, they have just been engaged in every kind of crime that you can possibly imagine. Last week, we talked about some of these crimes: torture, mass murder, assassinations, overthrowing foreign governments, gun running, drug trafficking. The list goes on. Today, I want to talk about some additional crimes that they've been engaged in that are very, very serious, that need to be exposed, where people need to be prosecuted. There's also another element to this. If you haven't watched our episode from a couple of weeks ago, all of this takes place under the pretext of keeping us safe from Islamists, from communists, from, national security threats. Unfortunately, nothing could be further from the truth. So if you have not watched that video yet, if you don't yet realize that these so-called intelligence agencies have been captured by anti-American Constitution haters, you need to go back and watch those, because then these crimes take on a whole new level of significance. Let's start with talking about mass spying. So for decades now, they have been spying on the American people in flagrant violation of the Constitution. The Fourth Amendment is very clear. Americans should be secure in their houses and their papers and their effects from unreasonable searches and seizures, and no warrant should be issued without probable cause and signed by a judge, and all that important protection for the privacy rights of Americans. For the deep state, for their intelligence agencies, that's just a minor inconvenience, and they don't care at all. In fact, even back in 2001, we got kind of a sneak preview of what was going on in the NSA when William Binney decided to leave the NSA and blow the whistle on what they were doing. This is a guy who was so loyal. He spent more than 30 years at the NSA, and then he saw what they were up to. In particular, he blew the whistle on an operation, on a scheme they had called Stellar Wind, where they were basically spying on all Americans. And when he blew the whistle, he said they were collecting most American emails. That includes yours. At least, he said, 80% of American phone calls were being collected and saved. And all of this, he said, was in direct violation of the constitutional rights of everybody in the country. That means you and your parents and your children and your wife and your husband and all the rest of it, right? They are spying on everybody. They said that the NSA can build up knowledge about people in the country, and that with this knowledge, they then have the ability to, quote, concoct all kinds of charges if they want to target you. Now, think of the power that this would give them. Say they want to vote to go a certain way in Congress, and say they don't have quite enough congressmen to vote in favor of whatever they want. Well, they have intelligence on every member of Congress. They know all their phone calls. They have all their emails. All it would take is a little bit of searching, and maybe this guy cheated on his wife. Maybe that guy was at a sex party. Maybe this guy was doing something even worse. Well, what happens? Then they can become blackmailed, right? Same thing with judges and Supreme Court justices. And you're thinking, oh, they would never, ever spy on Congress, right? Oh, they wouldn't do that. Oh, yes, they would. In fact, they've been caught spying on Congress. Check out this video with Dianne Feinstein. I mean, really, she's a deep state dupe if there ever was one. Dianne Feinstein, the far left nutjob Democrat from California. Turns out, while she was investigating the CIA's torture, another crime, right? The torture is a state and federal crime of enormous proportions. She found out that the CIA had actually hacked into their committee's computers. They had deleted evidence. They had replaced documents with other fraudulent documents. Incredible, right? Watch this video.
I have grave concerns that the CIA's search may well have violated the separation of powers principles embodied in the United States Constitution.
So she thinks it violated the Constitution. No kidding, right? Spying on members of Congress. If they'll spy on members of Congress, you can be absolutely sure that you are not safe either, right? So all the text messages you've sent, all the whatever you've done, all those secrets you have in your closet, those skeletons you have in your closet, they're all being stored in a massive facility out in Utah, where they have capability to store endless amounts of information, all your phone calls, all your emails, all your text messages, all of it. And the reality is they probably don't care about you right now unless you pose a threat to the deep state. But if and when you do pose a threat to the deep state, they've got all your stuff just ready and waiting. And with over 500,000 federal regulations, with criminal penalties attached, you can bet that they can find one to string you up on. In fact, liberal attorney Harvey Silvergate wrote a book saying that the average American commits about 3 felonies per day. Okay, that includes you too. If you cross the deep state, if you make them mad enough, they will come after you, just like they came after Mike Flynn, just like they came after Roger Stone, just like they came after Paul Manafort, just like they go after anybody who threatens them, right? They've got Congressman Stockman in prison. Anybody who crosses these people and poses a significant threat somehow ends up in the crosshairs. And you guys remember from last week, or 2 weeks ago, we talked with Chucky Schumer. He was talking to that guy Rachel Maddow on MSNBC, saying, "Oh, the intelligence agencies have 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you," right? And they do. Okay, this is absolutely criminal. William Binney is less known. More recently, we had Edward Snowden come out and expose some of this enormous spying apparatus, PRISM and other things. Basically, they were tapping everybody's phones and spying on everybody's internet activity. They were working with all the telecom giants to make sure they could spy on everybody. So this is the intelligence community for you. They are spying on you and everybody else in America. Totally illegal. And this has been going on for decades, okay? Senator Frank Church actually warned after the Church hearings where he was investigating some of these so-called intelligence agencies. He warned that if the NSA were to turn its espionage against the people of the United States, it would enable the dictatorship to impose total tyranny on America. And he says there would be no way to fight back. Let that sink in, guys. The deep state now has an apparatus capable of spying on everything and everyone, that actually is spying on everything and anyone, that if they were to go rogue, it would become impossible to fight back. Frankly, I'm not comfortable with anybody having those tools, much less the criminals in the deep state who have shown over and over again that they hate our country, they hate our freedom, they hate the Constitution, they hate God, they hate the church, and they hate you, right? Joe Sixpack, regular America, they hate you. And that's just the start of their machinations. They helped create the EU. We know because of a 1950 memo by the founder of the OSS, the precursor to the CIA, they called for creating a European Parliament. 1965 declassified CIA memo, they called on the vice president of the so-called European Community to pursue a single currency, which we now call the euro. We know that the U.S. officials involved in this urged the Europeans, acting as useful idiots for this EU agenda, to use stealth to avoid public debate until these proposals were, quote, virtually inescapable. We know that the CIA and the OSS funded front groups like the American Committee for a United Europe, European Movement. They funded youth movements demanding European federalism. And their goal, as we know, they actually wrote a whole book on this with a globalist, Rick Biondi, called World Federalism 101. Their goal was to create an Atlantic Union, which they would use as the nucleus for creating a global government. CIA has been involved at every step on this process. We know they've been involved in mind control experiments. So MKUltra, right? The documents that they were not able to shred, and they shredded the great majority of them, but the documents that they weren't able to shred revealed that they were working on mind control experiments under the guise of stopping the Soviets, right? Absolutely baloney. Okay, but they were doing mind control experiments. Some of the things we know, they were going into mental hospitals and force-feeding mental patients LSD to see if they could take control of their minds. They were trying to split people's personalities, see if they could brainwash people to become assassins. This is the kind of stuff that the deep state intelligence agencies have been doing. We know even back in the 1950s, we have declassified documents on Operation Mockingbird. So not only were they spying on everybody, they were also manipulating everybody. Some of these declassified documents show that they had a bunch of journalists on the payroll. Over 400 American journalists were carrying out assignments for the CIA. Some of them, and by the way, all of these that I'll list were members of the Council on Foreign Relations. You had Joseph Harsh of the Christian Science Monitor. You had Henry Luce, founder of Time and Life magazines. You had Walter Lippmann of the Los Angeles Times. You had Harry Schwartz of the New York Slimes. You had Chalmers Roberts of the Washington Compost. You had Malcolm Muir from Newsweek. You had Time magazine's John Scott. You had William Paley from CBS. And of course, the CIA recruited William Buckley back in 1951. He was the founder of the neoconservative globalist rag posing as a conservative magazine known as the National Review. Fun fact, he was also a member of the Globalist Council on Foreign Relations, and he was a member of the secret society Skull and Bones. If you haven't watched our episodes on that, make sure you go back and watch those, because suddenly the significance of all that will make sense to you. So the intelligence community, so-called, has been run by deep state operatives going back generations, and they have been doing the bidding of the deep state, spying on Americans, right? They were spying on Trump and his people. Now we know from the FISA-gate warrants. They've been spying on you, regular Americans. They've been spying on members of Congress. You can bet that they've been spying on members of the Supreme Court. And say they had an abominable healthcare nationalization program, and the Supreme Court was getting ready to strike it down. Well, maybe they could just go back into their archives and say, I wonder what this hypothetical Supreme Court justice, whose name won't be mentioned, was doing way back when. I bet he wouldn't want that on the front page of his local newspaper, would he? His wife probably wouldn't be happy about those things, would she? And hey, maybe that's how they get the decisions that they want, right? We need to recognize that having these kinds of powers, not only are they completely unconstitutional, they're dangerous beyond belief. And, if you could trust the deep state, that'd be one thing. They've shown over and over and over and over again that they can't be trusted. So they've been spying on us all. They've been manipulating us all. They've been infiltrating the media. They've been infiltrating the big tech companies. They are completely out of control. They've been doing all sorts of horrifying experiments. We talked about MKUltra. We know they've been engaged in torture, mass murder, all these kinds of things. They are totally out of control. They need to be held accountable. They need to be held exposed. But they need to be exposed. But that's only going to be possible if people like you take this information and share it. Right? YouTube, another deep state agency, is doing everything possible to keep this information under wraps. They're doing everything they can to prevent you from finding videos from the New American. So make sure you like, share, subscribe. Send this video to people you know who need to see it. Subscribe and subscribe and subscribe. And make sure you share. I'm Alex Newman. I'm your host behind the Deep State. Thank you very much for watching. And until next week, God bless.